Wildcard Boxing Club, Los Angeles. March 2006. Tuesday afternoon, 3:20 p.m. Tommy the Tower Morrison has made the same mistake that bigger men have been making for centuries. He's looking at Manny Pacquiao and seeing exactly what his eyes tell him to see. A small Filipino fighter, 5'6" in boxing shoes. Maybe 40 pounds after a heavy meal. Standing across from a 6'8", 240-pound American heavyweight, who could use him as a sparring dummy. Morrison doesn't know it yet, but he's about to say something that will change how he thinks about boxing forever. Something that will make perfect sense to everyone watching. Something that will prove completely, catastrophically wrong in exactly 4 seconds. The gym is busy with the usual afternoon crowd. Fighters training for upcoming fights. Trainers shouting instructions. The steady rhythm of leather hitting heavy bags. But in a few minutes, all of that will stop. Everyone will be watching two men who shouldn't be in the same ring together. Morrison looks down at Pacquiao and sees a mathematical impossibility. How does someone that small expect to compete with someone his size? The reach difference alone is 20 inches. The height difference is 14 inches. In his mind, this isn't even a fair matchup. It's basic physics. He's about to share this observation with everyone in the building. Loudly. With complete confidence. And that's when his education will begin. The Filipino sensation who's been systematically stirring opponents across multiple weight divisions, like a man possessed by some ancient warrior spirit. Fast hands that create optical illusions. Devastating power that defies every principle of physics, taught in sports science courses. The kind of warrior heart that makes grown men question their life choices and mere paths. But even legends need sparring partners, especially when preparing to face bigger, stronger opponents who possess physical advantages that can't be simulated in solo training. That's where Tommy the Tower Morrison comes in. Not the famous heavyweight champion Tommy Morrison who died of AIDS complications. This is a different Morrison entirely, a lesser-known fighter climbing the heavyweight ladder one opponent at a time. 6'8" tall, 240 pounds of raw American heavyweight muscle sculpted through years of dedicated training and genetic lottery winnings. 26 years old with the kind of physical presence that makes rooms go quiet when he walks in. Professional record 18-3 with 16 knockouts, all but 2 of his victories ending before the final bell. The kind of size advantage that usually ends conversations before they begin. That makes smaller fighters reconsider their career choices just by stepping into the same ring. Morrison has been training at Wildcard for 3 months now, working his way up the heavyweight division's competitive ladder one opponent at a time. Big puncher with genuine knockout power in both hands. Decent jab that he uses like a telephone pole to keep opponents at distance. Solid footwork for a man his size, though he sometimes struggles with smaller, faster opponents who can get inside his reach. But more than anything else, Tommy Morrison possesses that dangerous combination of legitimate boxing skill and absolute confidence that comes from spending your entire life being the biggest, strongest, most physically imposing person in every room you enter. From elementary school playgrounds to professional boxing gyms, he's never met anyone who could match his physical presence or make him question his natural advantages. He's heard about Pacquiao, of course. Everyone in the boxing world has heard about the Filipino destroyer who moves up weight classes like other men climb stairs, seemingly immune to the physical limitations that constrain normal fighters. Fast little guy who hits harder than physics says someone his size should be able to hit. Impressive against smaller opponents in his own weight range. But Morrison has never seen the appeal of watching little men fight each other. In his worldview, boxing is fundamentally about size, strength, and power. The biggest, strongest man should win, and usually does when skill levels are relatively equal. Boxing is a big man's sport, he tells anyone who listen during training sessions. His voice carrying the confidence of someone who's never been proven wrong. Always has been, always will be. These little guys look good hitting each other, make for exciting fights on TV. But put them in with real size, real heavyweight power, and it's over quick. Physics doesn't lie. Morrison stands 6'8" in his boxing shoes, a towering presence that dominates every space he occupies. His reach measures 84 inches from fingertip to fingertip, longer than most men are tall. When he extends his jab, it travels from a height and distance that most fighters have never had to defend against in their entire career. His left hook comes down like a sledgehammer dropped from a construction crane, generating power through leverage and gravity that smaller fighters simply cannot match. His right cross could drive railroad spikes through concrete, backed by 240 pounds of muscle and bone moving in perfect coordination. At 5'6" in his fighting boots, Pacquiao would need to jump with both feet off the ground to touch Morrison's chin with his outstretched fist. The physical mismatch is so obvious it seems almost unfair, like a mathematical equation with only one possible solution. Today, Roach has asked Morrison to participate in some light sparring with Pacquiao as part of the Filipino's preparation for facing larger opponents. Nothing too serious or competitive, just movement work. Give Pacquiao some looks at different body types, different reach disadvantages, different angles of attack and defense that he might encounter against bigger fighters. Easy money for Morrison, $200 cash for a few rounds of glorified bad work with someone who barely reaches his chest. He's sparred with much more dangerous heavyweights than this small Filipino, absorbed punishment from men who hit harder and knew more about the technical aspects of boxing. Just move around out there, Roach tells Morrison as they prepare to enter the ring, wrapping the heavyweight's hands with practiced efficiency. Let him work on his angles, his distance management. Don't try to hurt him or prove anything. This isn't about ego or establishing dominance. It's about giving him useful work. Morrison nods his understanding, but inside his mind he's already planning how this session will unfold. The little Filipino will come forward in his typical aggressive style, trying to pressure and overwhelm through pace and volume. Morrison will keep him at the end of his jab, controlling distance with textbook heavyweight boxing. Maybe throw a few light shots to demonstrate the speed and power differences. Educational experience for Pacquiao about what happens when you face someone with real physical advantages. As they climb through the ropes and into the ring, other fighters throughout the gym stop their own training sessions to watch. Word spreads quickly through the building's network of trainers, fighters, and staff. Pacquiao versus Morrison. David versus Goliath wearing boxing gloves. Even if it's supposedly just light sparring, everyone wants to see what happens when the Filipino destroyer meets American heavyweight size and power. They meet in the center of the ring for final instructions from Roach. The size difference is almost comical, like a parent addressing a small child. Morrison looks down at Pacquiao from what seems like a different altitude. His shadow completely covers the smaller man when he stands directly in front of him. When they touch gloves in the traditional show of respect, Morrison's massive hand completely engulfs Pacquiao's like an adult shaking hands with a toddler. Remember, this is just work. Roach calls from his position at ringside, his voice carrying the authority of someone who's seen too many sparring sessions turn into ego-driven wars. Stay sharp, stay smart, but keep it controlled. Nobody needs to prove anything here. But as they return to their respective corners to await the opening bell, Morrison can't resist making one comment. He's performed for crowds his entire professional career, knows how to work an audience and create moments that people remember. The gym has gone unusually quiet, with every conversation stopped and every eye focused on the ring, waiting for the action to begin. "Hope you brought a ladder, little man," Morrison says loud enough for everyone in the building to hear, grinning broadly as he settles into his corner and begins his final warm-up routine. "You can't reach my chin from down there, might need to jump just to hit my chest." The comment draws scattered laughter and knowing nods from some of the other heavyweights training in the gym. Even a few trainers can't suppress small smiles at the obvious physical reality Morrison is pointing out. It's the kind of good-natured trash talk that happens in boxing gyms every day around the world. Big guys poking fun at smaller fighters, established veterans testing newcomers. The natural hierarchy of size and weight classes, asserting itself through verbal jousting. Morrison isn't trying to be deliberately cruel or disrespectful. In his mind, he's simply stating what appears to be obvious physical and mathematical reality that everyone in the building can observe with their own eyes. The reach difference between them measures exactly 20. The height difference is a full 14 inches. In any conventional boxing match, these numbers would represent insurmountable advantages. Pacquiao would need to get inside Morrison's jab, survive his power shots, slip his counters and find ways to generate meaningful offense while looking up at a target that sits well above his natural punching range. It's a geometric puzzle that has stumped smaller fighters for as long as boxing has existed as an organized sport. "Geometry doesn't lie, my friend," Morrison continues, shadowboxing a bit as he talks, his massive frame filling the corner of the ring like a monument to heavyweight power. "I can hit you all day long from here. You need a stepladder to hit me back. It's just simple math." The other fighters at ringside nod along with this assessment. Even supporters of smaller fighters have to admit that Morrison makes valid points about the physical realities involved. Size advantages are real advantages in combat sports. Reach matters, height matters, weight and leverage matter. These aren't abstract concepts or theoretical discussions. They're measurable physical attributes that directly impact fighting outcomes. But Pacquiao doesn't respond verbally to any of Morrison's comments or observations. He just nods slightly and begins pulling on his sparring gloves with the methodical precision of someone who's performed this ritual 10,000 times before in gyms around the world. His facial expression hasn't changed since entering the ring. No visible anger or offense taken. No defensive posturing or verbal counterpunching. just the calm, focused demeanor of a craftsman preparing his tools for another day of work. However, something subtle in the gym's atmosphere begins to shift in ways that experienced fighters and trainers can sense but not easily define. The scattered laughter dies away gradually. Side conversations between spectators stop mid-sentence. Even fighters who were previously focused on their own training routines find themselves unconsciously gravitating toward ringside positions, where they can observe the upcoming sparring session. Something about Pacquiao's complete stillness and lack of reaction suggests that this won't be the light, educational sparring session that Roach requested and Morrison expects. There's a quality of focused attention in the Filipino's demeanor that veteran fighters recognize, the calm that precedes storms, the silence that comes before devastating violence. The bell rings for round one, its sharp metallic sound cutting through the gym's expectant atmosphere like a knife. Morrison comes out exactly according to his predetermined game plan, moving with the confident rhythm of someone who's never had his physical advantages neutralized or overcome. He establishes his jab immediately, using his massive 20-inch reach advantage to keep Pacquiao at the end of his punches, well outside the Filipino's own attacking range. The shots land clean on Pacquiao's gloves and shoulders, but they land with authority, pushing the smaller man backward step by step, disrupting his forward momentum and preventing him from establishing any offensive rhythm of his own. Classic heavyweight boxing strategy executed with textbook precision. For the first minute and a half, the sparring session unfolds exactly as Morrison predicted during his pre-fight analysis. He controls the distance and dictates the pace with methodical heavyweight boxing fundamental. His jab snaps out like a massive piston, too long and too powerful for Pacquiao to counter effectively. When the Filipino attempts to come forward and close the gap, Morrison either ties him up in clinches or pushes him backward with straight shots that reset the distance to his advantage. See what I mean? Morrison calls out between exchanges, his voice carrying easily through the now silent gym. This is what real heavyweight size looks like when it's used properly. Distance control, range management, physical advantages properly utilized. From a purely technical standpoint, Morrison is demonstrating sound boxing principles. He's using his natural gifts intelligently, maintaining the kind of distance that maximizes his advantages while minimizing Pacquiao's opportunities to counter or establish offensive position. Pacquiao, for his part, isn't landing anything meaningful or significant. His own jab consistently falls short by 6 inches or more. His hook attempts can't reach their intended targets. His uppercuts hit nothing but air. He looks exactly like what Morrison suggested he would look like. A small man trying to fight a giant without the proper tools or strategy to overcome massive physical disadvantages. But something strange is happening that becomes apparent to careful observers as the round progresses. Pacquiao isn't showing signs of frustration or desperation despite his complete inability to mount any effective offense. He isn't rushing forward recklessly trying to close distance at all costs. He isn't throwing wild, desperate combinations hoping that volume might overcome the reach disadvantage. Instead, he appears to be studying Morrison with the focused intensity of a scientist examining an interesting specimen under laboratory conditions. He's watching the timing and rhythm of Morrison's jab, observing the patterns in his footwork, calculating angles and distances with the cold precision of a mathematician working through complex equations. Every movement Morrison makes is being cataloged and analyzed. Every defensive habit is being noted and stored for future reference. Every slight adjustment in stance or guard position is being processed through whatever computational system exists inside Pacquiao's mind. 90 seconds into the round, Pacquiao makes his first significant adjustment to the tactical situation. Instead of continuing to try to walk through or around Morrison's jab in straight lines, he begins moving at subtle angles that create approach lanes where none existed before. Not wild lateral movement that would telegraph his intentions, but precise geometric adjustments that open up attacking corridors while simultaneously making Morrison's defensive positioning less effective. When Morrison throws his jab now, Pacquiao steps slightly left or right at the exact moment of commitment, moving into positions where the punch can't reach him while closing the overall distance by a few precious inches with each exchange. Morrison notices the adjustment but isn't particularly concerned about its implications. He's faced plenty of smaller fighters who tried similar strategies over the years. Getting closer, little man, but still not close enough to matter. He taunts while resetting his distance with a quick backstep that reestablishes his preferred fighting range. That's when Pacquiao does something that completely changes the dynamic of the sparring session. Instead of pursuing Morrison aggressively when he backpedals to reset distance, Pacquiao plants his feet firmly and simply waits. He just stands there in the center of the ring, hands dropping to his sides in a completely relaxed position, weight evenly distributed, looking for all the world like he's inviting Morrison to come forward and engage him on more equal terms. Morrison has never encountered anything quite like this in his 6-year professional career. Fighters don't just stop moving during active sparring sessions. They certainly don't drop their hands and present themselves as stationary targets for their opponents to attack. It goes against every survival instinct that keeps boxers healthy and competitive in the ring. "What the hell are you doing?" Morrison asks, genuinely confused by this tactical development. "This isn't a game, man. Keep your hands up." Pacquiao doesn't answer, just maintains that relaxed stance, hands loose at his sides, weight evenly distributed. But his eyes are locked on Morrison's face with an intensity that makes the bigger man suddenly uncomfortable. Morrison decides to teach the Filipino a lesson about respect. He steps forward, planning to tap Pacquiao with a light jab to show him what happens when you drop your guard against a heavyweight. The jab is perfectly thrown, textbook technique, proper distance, good timing. It should land clean on Pacquiao's unprotected face. It never arrived. Pacquiao moves at the exact moment Morrison commits to the punch. Not a wild defensive movement, but a precise step that carries him inside the jab's arc, past the point where it can generate power. Suddenly, impossibly, he's standing directly in front of Morrison, well inside the heavyweight's reach, in perfect position to counter. Morrison's jab travels over Pacquiao's head harmlessly, and that's when Pacquiao's hands start moving. Left hook to the body. Morrison's breath exits in a sharp gasp as the punch lands just below his right elbow, targeting a nerve cluster he didn't know existed. The power is shocking. Not the slapping shots he expected from a smaller man, but genuine, rib-rattling force that makes him double over slight. Right uppercut to the solar plexus. Morrison's diaphragm spasms, disrupting his breathing rhythm completely. For several seconds he can't draw air into his lungs. The punch traveled maybe 8 inches but landed with the impact of a sledgehammer to his core. Left hook to the liver. Morrison's legs buckle involuntarily as paralyzing pain radiates through his torso. He's been hit to the body before. Every heavyweight has absorbed punishment to the midsection, but this feels like being stabbed with a hot knife. Right uppercut to the point of the chin. Morrison's world explodes into stars and silence. The punch doesn't knock him out. His size and conditioning are too substantial for that, but it rocks his brain inside his skull, disrupting his equilibrium, his vision, his ability to process what just happened to him. 4 seconds. 4 punches. The biggest, strongest, longest man in the gym reduced to a gasping, wobbly-legged giant who suddenly understands that height means nothing when someone can get inside your guard. Morrison doesn't go down, but he staggers backward into the ropes, gloves raised defensively, eyes wide with shock and new respect. The gym has gone completely silent. 25 fighters and trainers staring at something they've never seen before, a 5'6" Filipino making a 6'8" heavyweight look helpless. Roach calls time immediately, not because anyone is hurt, but because the educational portion of this session is complete. Morrison has learned what he came to learn. Pacquiao has demonstrated what he needed to demonstrate. "You okay?" Roach asks Morrison, who nods slowly while removing his mouthpiece. "Yeah, I'm fine." But his voice carries a different tone than it did 5 minutes earlier. The casual confidence has been replaced by something approaching awe. "I've never felt anything like that. How did he get inside my jab? I've got 20 inches on him." Pacquiao approaches, offers his gloves for a respectful tap, and speaks quietly. "Reach is distance, not time. You throw long, but I move faster than your punch travels. Inside your arc, your height becomes disadvantage." Morrison processes this for a moment, still catching his breath. "I couldn't see the punches coming. You were too close, too low. I've never had to defend against someone from those angles. That's why small fighters can beat big fighters." Pacquiao explains without arrogance. "We live in spaces you don't train to protect. We attack targets you don't expect. Your size is advantage at distance. But distance is not permanent." The two fighters talk for several minutes after sparring ends. Morrison asking questions about footwork, timing, angles of attack. Pacquiao patiently explaining principles that most heavyweights never consider because they've never had to. "In Philippines I fight men bigger than me since I was teenager," Pacquiao tells him. "Size advantage only works if smaller fighter fights big fighter's game. Change the game, change the result." Morrison nods, processing lessons that reshape his understanding of boxing. For 6 years as a professional he's relied on physical advantages to overcome technical deficiencies. Height, reach, power. They've been enough to win fights against opponents who respected his size and tried to outbox him at distance. "I've been training wrong," Morrison admits to Roach later while reviewing video of the sparring session. I never learned to fight on the inside because nobody ever got there before. This guy made me realize I don't know how to defend my own body. Roach, who's trained champions at every weight class, nods knowingly. Size is real advantage, but it's not automatic advantage. You have to know how to use it. And you have to know what to do when someone neutralizes it. Word spreads quickly through the boxing community. Manny Pacquiao made a 6'8" heavyweight look helpless in 4 seconds of sparring, not through knockout power or lucky shots, but through systematic exploitation of weaknesses that Morrison didn't know he had. Morrison becomes one of Pacquiao's most dedicated training partners over the following months, not because he enjoys being dominated, but because he learns more about boxing in those sessions than he learned in his first 6 years as a professional. Fighting Manny taught me that boxing isn't about imposing your physical gifts. Morrison tells ESPN in a 2007 interview, "It's about solving problems faster than your opponent can create them. I had all the physical tools to beat him, but he's solving problems I didn't know exist." The sparring session becomes legendary at Wildcard. New fighters hear the story during their first week. Heavyweights who think size solves everything get told about the day a Filipino destroyer made a giant question physics. Years later, when Morrison retires from boxing and begins training younger fighters, he always tells them the same thing. "I thought I was a big, strong heavyweight who could beat anyone smaller than me. Then I met a man who showed me that fighting isn't about how big you are. It's about how smart you are with the size you have."